by the early 2000s, I had like 30,000 records.
Oh man,
And
that's a lot.
so trying to narrow it down to a few, it's like, when people ask you, what's your favorite song? I can't answer that question because I have so many
It's
songs I
so
love.
hard. Let me get to my notes. This is the Living Numbers Podcast, and I am your host, Tony Rambles. This is the place where everyone's interesting if you ask the right questions. Today, I have another Tony on. I would say that this is the better Tony. This is the real Tony right here. I'm just trying to make my way in the world as a secondary. No, I'm just. I've got Tony Winyard here with me today, and y'all know how we do things around here. When we have somebody on for the first time, we have to give them a wonderful intro. So, Tony, here we go. Prepare to be serenaded. Hailing from the Sudan. Okay. Yeah, y'all might not have known that by looking at this guy, but he's got a great story behind that. He made his way in the world as a professional DJ. His great acclaim took him to 11 countries. That's just living. We're not even talking about visiting. Rocking the night scene as the #1 show in town. After moving back to the UK, after doing some soul searching, having a brief stint as a financial advisor, he began DJing again at weddings for barely any money at all. That's a funny story too. He then took that small town DJ lifestyle to becoming UK wedding DJ of the year. Eventually, he shifted his focus toward health and wellness, where he, after his own trials and tribulations, began the Habits in Health podcast, which explores how creating better habits improve aspects of your health with tips from expert guests from all around the world. He became a self-announced, self-proclaimed habitologist, trained in emotional intelligence. He believes humor is the best way to connect with people, so much he tried his hand at stand-up comedy. He's thoughtful, ambitious, and curious. I present the Tony Winyard. Say hello to the people, Tony.
Oh man, that's quite an introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done some research. Cool. That was a
I,
surprise there. Yeah.
I try to get a few nuggets from like bios and stuff and listening to, you on other podcasts. So I try to pull some stuff that people may not know from just reading like your homepage, like the stand-up comedian thing. I was like, oh yeah, I got to throw that in there. You talked about being a financial advisor. I was kind of on that track, working in banking too at one point, but I was like, do I want to do this? No. So much
Oh
like
man,
you,
soul
we
destroyer.
both kind of switched paths and went off into do things very different than being financial advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start here. And our first number is 5, because I want to know, what was your top 5 things to do in the summertime as a kid? Because I feel like that is the time that's where we can be kids. Like, we don't have to worry about school. We don't have to really worry about much. You just, do whatever it is that you want to do in the summertime. So what say you, Mr. Tony?
Well, the top two that were kind of play for #1, and they're equal, really. I was always playing football, or as you guys call it, soccer. So I'm just always
Mm-hmm.
playing football every day. I would just get up, I'd go to the park, play football, come back for lunch, go back, play football, come back for dinner, go back and play football. I mean, that was.
Oh, wow.
But that saying that, music has been like so special to me since I was really small. I started when I was 7 years old. I started to do a paper round, and
Mm-hmm.
every penny or every cent I earned from that paper round, I spent on buying music. And then when I got a little bit older, I started doing the milk rounds, helping to deliver milk. And so I was earning much more money, so I could buy much more
Yeah.
records, you know. So by the time I was like 14, I had a massive record collection. So music was always
Wow.
special to me. So they
Okay.
they would be the main two. But I was always on my bike, playing other things in the park,
Mm.
swimming. I was always very active, and I still am very active. You know, I love kind of physical stuff, playing football, working out, you know, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We for us it was always video games, and it's not like now where you're gaming basically by yourself at home, but you may be talking to other people that are across the world. We were gaming together. So my brothers, my cousins, friends, we would just kind of hang out and game uh football, American football. We play basketball outside. We loved being outside, just throwing the ball around. Whatever ball you had, you know, we were just gonna make it work. And it was in Detroit, so it wasn't as hot and humid as it is here in Texas. But even when we moved down here, like if everybody was outside hooping, like we gonna go hoop, and you know, and we were in living in Green Arbor on the southeast side of Houston. I was kind of like I'm just gonna say it, I was kind of the number one draft pick when we went out and played, right? Because I could jump pretty high, I was fast. So if we were playing basketball, HD was number one in basketball because he was like 6'10". This dude was tall, he could do it all. But if we were playing football, Detroit, that's what they call me. Detroit, oh, that was me, the number one pick. So we would play video games, play sports outside. I said top five, but that's kind of it. That's really it. We didn't do anything else.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, yeah.
So from there, I want you to tell us, you already kind of started the story about how you really got into music as a kid. What was the first record that you bought?
The first 7-inch that I bought, you probably never heard of. It was a guy called Leapy Lee, and the song was called
Okay.
Little Arrows.
Tell
And
us about it.
so it was just, I don't know. I mean, I think I was 7 years old. I think I was given like a voucher for Christmas from a relation or something. And I
Mm-hmm.
just went to the local record, Woolworths, because you got Woolworths in the States, haven't you? Yeah. So we used to have Woolworths in the UK. And I just went to Woolworths, bought this record, this 7-inch. And then I think the first album I bought, there was a UK band called The Sweet. And I think I bought an album from them. And so in my kind of, when I was first into music, I was really into, I was kind of into everything, but I was more into pop, you know, when I was a kid.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then when I got to around about 14, 15, I started getting quite heavy into reggae and various forms of reggae. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I was kind of getting quite deep into soul as well.
So
And
you were all over the place.
yeah, and I was, yeah, I mean, when I started to DJ, and the DJ thing in itself was a kind of complete fluke. Well, I'd never had any pretensions to be a DJ. I never
Mm-hmm.
had any, like, I wasn't wishing to be a DJ when I was older, you know?
Right, right, right.
And it happened by mistake. Well, not mistake. It happened. A, a friend of mine had a birthday party. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever my friends had parties, they'd always ask me to bring my music along
Of
because I had
course.
such a bigger collection, you know? But most people don't know how to treat records. They'd be putting their fingers all over the vinyl, and no one's, you ain't putting
You're
your
like, hey,
finger over
hey,
my
hey, time
vinyl,
out,
you
time
know?
out. Wait a second.
So I was like, I wouldn't let anyone touch my records because it was really annoying me, people putting their fingers all over the records. So
Mm-hmm.
there was one particular party, I didn't let anyone else come near the music. I was just playing the music all night. And it was in a function room above a pub. And at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the party, the manager, and I was like 14 or something, the manager came over to me and said, "How much do you charge?" I said, "How much do I charge for what?" He says, "For DJing." I said, "No, I'm not a DJ. I was just playing music for my friend's party." He said, "Well, what's a DJ?" I said, "Well, yeah, yeah, but it was, I'm just helping my friend out." He said, "Well, would you like to play here for Christmas Eve?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah,
Sure, why
okay."
not?
Yeah. And he said, "How much do you want?" I said, "I don't know, £30." He said, "You're booked." And then I thought, wow, I'm a DJ. And it had never crossed my mind before that I was a DJ. For me, I just love the music, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I,
I'm the car DJ because whenever I get in the car, it almost doesn't really matter what car I get in. If I can control the music, I would like to be in control of the music. And I had this book, a lot like you, it wasn't records, but it was CDs. I had this book. It had to be about this big, and it sat right in the passenger seat. And whatever I was thinking about playing, whatever I was wanting that day, and you got the 6 CD changer when you get a car that's at least a little bit okay. And so I would flip that book open, man, and I would like, what 6 CDs am I gonna ride to here for the next day or two? So go ahead, keep going, Mr. DJ.
Well, and then so then I'd suddenly kind of my whole perception changed because then one day I'm just crazy about music. The next day I'm a DJ. So I started, I guess in a way it changed how I was buying music as well, because before I was purely buying music for myself. Now I'm kind of buying music. Okay, what's going to make people dance? Which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not the
yeah.
same as buying music for yourself, you know?
No,
I mean, I would
not if
still
that's
buy
not the
music for
music that
my,
you're into.
yeah, I would still buy music for myself, but I would also be thinking about, okay, is this going to make people dance or is this just for me? You know? So it was always
Right.
that kind of thinking as well. Yeah.
That's fun. I remember when I first started getting music, I think I was in the 9th grade. I don't even know how I got the money, or because I didn't have a paper route. I wasn't delivering milk. But I think maybe I was doing chores around the house, like cutting grass and that kind of stuff. And I want to say it was Twister's first album. And that's when people was bootlegging stuff. So I think I got this album, but it wasn't even like the right songs on it. It wasn't the full album. I got a piece of junk, but it was my CD. I had my CD player and I took care of it. I think I got Kanye West College Dropout, I think was another one that I got early on, where it was a bootleg and it wasn't actually any good. It was kind of some mixed stuff on there. So I kind of got gypped by a couple of people, but the first album like that I bought from the store in the plastic, I think was the Beg for Mercy G Unit album. I think that was the first one that I bought, and the album was amazing. I wouldn't listen to that music now. That's just not where I am. But I can look at those songs and listen and go, dang, like this stuff really hit hard. What's some of the stuff that as you were buying music, getting into the music, like a couple of albums that stand out to you, I guess in those teenage years?
Well, and that's the thing is about music from when you were a teenager is what kind of you have real fond memories, don't you? You know? I
Yeah.
think two albums that really stick out for me, and I can remember buying them on the same day in the same shop at the same time. It was Earth, Wind and Fire, I Am,
Yes.
and Blondie, Parallel Lines. And they're two very different albums, but I remember buying them both at the same time, and they're
Mm-hmm.
both like such brilliant albums, you know. And I
Oh my
love Earth,
goodness.
Wind and Fire. I have so many albums from Earth, Wind and Fire.
So Tony, we are kindred spirits. I talked about this with another guy I had on. His name was Nick Morrison. He's played around the world musician, blah blah blah. And we talked about Earth, Wind and Fire. And I went back and I listened to all of their stuff. Like when I got Spotify, I was like, I'm such a huge fan of what they do, and you could probably attest to this. You could see their music changing as it progressed through the 70s, through the 80s.
Yeah,
And if it came out in the 90s, I probably didn't listen to it at all.
yeah,
So so Earth, Wind and Fire is huge up there for me.
yeah.
And then
Well,
Blondie, that's like Tide is High, right? That's one of their songs.
well, no, that was later on. So the album
Later. Okay.
Parallel Lines had stuff like I think it was like Sunday Girl and Denis Denis and some of that stuff. Yeah.
So those two really stick out for you in your teenage years. As you, let's say, into your 20s, what are some albums that stick out then? I know I didn't plan these questions, but we're just talking music now.
Oh man, there's so many. There's just like that's a really tough question because I had by the early 2000s I had like 30,000 records,
Oh man,
and
that's a lot.
so trying to narrow it down to a few. It's like when people ask you what's your favorite song, I can't answer that question because I have so many
It's
songs I
so
love.
hard.
Yeah, what
Okay,
what
I'll go
answer I
first
give you
then.
today is going to be a different answer tomorrow, and it's going to be a different answer the next day.
Exactly. I'll go first. I'll give you some time because I have a couple that stick out in my mind. Lupe Fiasco is one of my favorite rappers of all time. Probably 1 and 1A, Eminem and Lupe for me. And the album Food and Liquor, oh my goodness. If listeners, if you have never listened to Food and Liquor or The Cool, his second album, and that's back when people still did concept albums, like your whole album was about something specific. Those two albums are just amazing. Food and Liquor, I will put a little bit higher because there are no songs that you have to skip. And it's rare nowadays, unless like you have people like Drake that will make just like an album just full of hits. It's not
Mm.
necessarily about one thing specific.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you look at the album Scorpion, right? It's just hit after hit after hit. Like all of those songs on the radio. But when you look at Food and Liquor by Lupe Fiasco, I mean, it's just a tone that goes through that album that's so amazing. I was like, this guy's like, this is one of my favorite people ever. And Eminem, the Eminem show, that came out when I was a teenager. But the Eminem show, I was like, no one else can do it like this guy. This From there, it was just like, I'm the biggest Eminem fan ever. So I gave you some time. Those are my favorite artists and some of the albums that stuck out to me. So your turn, Tony. No cop outs, man.
Well, I mean, there's three songs that are really special to me, and most people aren't. It depends. I mean, you may know them if you're heavy into the soul scene. So number one is oh God, I forgot her name now. Is listen, I'll do number two and three first, and the first one will come back. So number two is the Jones Girls. This feeling's killing me on
Okay.
Philly sounds. I just used to love some of the Philly stuff. Number three was a woman named, oh man, her name's gone for me now. Um, my brain's just gone. I can't think of the first one or the third one. The the first one is Adriana Evans,
Okay.
um, former girlfriend of Eric Benet.
Eric
But
Benet.
yeah, but her song, Adriana Evans, looking for your love, that just kills me, that tune. It's so
Yeah.
cool. And the third one is Sherry Brown, It's a Pleasure.
Okay.
So they're they're,
Okay.
they're
Okay.
kind of
Okay.
in my
Yeah.
top three. I just love the sounds of all of those, those songs.
It's amazing because I listen to a lot of honestly, I just listen to a lot of different stuff. I listen to like soft rock, like 70s, 80s, like the Eagles. I have a lot of them on my playlist. Of course, Michael Jackson is somebody that, everybody has Michael Jackson. And you really don't know how great his stuff is, at least for me, until you're like scrolling through and you're like, dang, I got a lot of Michael Jackson on this playlist. Because anything that's I kind of dump everything into one playlist, really.
Yeah, yeah. I've got some playlists like
Because
that.
I like to vibe it all in. Like we talked about a lot of Earth, Wind, and Fire. There's some AC/DC in there. So
Right.
some Temptations. I'm from Detroit, so we got to go Motown, Temptations, Jackson
Yeah.
5, Aretha Franklin. So, man, I could just talk about music all day. So how did you go from like DJing these small gigs, right? Because now you're like, wait, I am a DJ, huh? To that star kind of rising and taking you all over the world.
Well, I've got a funny story about. So I once I realized, okay, I'm a DJ. So then I started setting kind of goals, and I want to be a DJ in this club and that club and so on. And I grew up in London, and the London in the center of London, some of the top clubs there, it was very difficult to get your foot in the door. And I was trying to get my foot in the door when I was really young, but I just kept getting no's all the
You
time.
didn't have enough clout.
Yeah, exactly. But it's often about who you just get a lucky break. And I got my lucky break in a real kind of freaky situation. So I was driving a minicab when I was about 18, and I there was one particular estate which was really rough. There was lots of trouble there and stabbings and all kinds of stuff going
Oh,
on. And our minicab office said, if you drop anyone off in this place, you do not pick anyone up. You just get out of there as quick as you can. So one night I'm coming there, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. As I'm driving in, there's a car park outside, and there's a really flash car. It's like a brand new Jaguar or something like that. And it's
ooh,
pouring down with rain. And the bonnet, or I think you guys call it the hood, the hood's up, and this guy's looking inside, and he's obviously trying to fix something. And I've just kind of spotted him. Anyway, I've gone in, dropped my passenger off. I'm driving out. This guy comes running over to me and says, please, can you like, give me a lift? I said, man, I'm not allowed to pick anyone up. And he literally got on the floor and it's pouring down the rain. He said, please don't leave me here. And he looked so out of place. He was in his 30s or
Mm.
40s, which to me was like a really old guy at the time. And he was really well dressed. So I said, okay, go on, get in. Anyway, so I said, where are we going? He says to Hampstead, which is one of the most expensive places in London. So we're driving there, and then I've got like the latest music on a cassette at the time. And after about 15 minutes, he said, man, you got some good music. I said, yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
DJ. And he looked at me, he went, I can't actually say what he really said, but he said, go away. That's not what he said. But and I said,
Like, get out of
why'd
here.
why'd you say that? He said, well, I own a club and I'm looking for a DJ. I went, wow. I said, what club? He said, Le Beat Route. And at the time, that was one of the clubs. I'm like, wow. And he said, would you like an audition? And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. I went, yeah, of course I would like an audition. So the next day, he had me in for an audition. I passed the audition. He gave me 2 nights a week in his club. Within
Wow.
4 weeks, I was working in two other clubs. So I'm doing his club 2 nights, I'm doing another club 2 nights, and another club 2 nights, all in the center of London, like some of the top clubs. So from
Whoa.
one minute, I haven't got my foot in the door at any clubs. A month later, I'm working in three of the best clubs. Yeah.
Man, that is amazing. Because sometimes it's like you may be working and you're not, I mean, you're making money, but you're like, when is my time gonna come? Right? We all have that question in our mind, no matter what we're doing, whether you're a DJ, a podcaster, you're an accountant, right? Whatever. You're just kind of thinking like, okay, when is my time gonna come? And some people are like, my time is going to come. I just got to keep working. And some people are like, I might need to do something else. Like, this sucks.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you got into those huge clubs. What are the names of the other two for the people out there listening that may be familiar?
So one club was called Oxford's, and it was on Oxford Street, which is like one of the main streets in London.
Mhm.
And the other club was called L'Equipe Anglaise. So yeah, I had a great time in those three clubs. And then I had a situation where there was a record store called Bluebirds where most DJs went. It was they got records imports from the States much earlier than most places, and it was one
Mm.
of the places to go. And I used to live in this place. I was just in there all the time. Anyway, so this guy who owns three clubs in Spain, a lot of club owners used to come to this record store. And this
Oh,
particular
that's a good
guy,
place to be then.
yeah, and this guy who owned all these clubs in Spain, who's a Spanish guy, came to the store and said to Billy and Bill, the two guys who own the store, can you recommend an English DJ for me? I want an English DJ. They've recommended me. So all of a sudden I'm off to Spain, and I was just having the
Wow.
time of my life in Spain.
Man, tell people, because if you live here in the States, I don't, especially in Texas, you don't always get a good idea of how close those countries are and how easy it is to get from one country to another. So, like, what is I guess, a car ride or a train ride from, I guess, UK to Spain, or from Spain to somewhere else that you were playing?
So I was on the southwest of Spain, so it's on the Atlantic coast, kind of, closest to
Mm-hmm.
America, I suppose you could say. So you wouldn't really take a train, but to fly from London to near there, it would be about 2.5 hours, something like that.
Oh, that's nothing.
So for us, that's like a big distance. For you, yeah, it's nothing. But it's
That's
all
easy.
perspective, isn't it? For us, that's a long way. So, but yeah, I was working where the Spanish go on holiday, because there's another
Mm-hmm.
side of Spain. The southeast of Spain is where a lot of English people, a lot of British people go. But I was on the southwest of Spain where the Spanish go on holiday, and I think it's a much nicer part of Spain. But it's a part
Mm.
of Spain where no one speaks English, so it made me learn Spanish.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go. And so you got to Spain,
yeah.
and you said you had a lot of fun in Spain. So what kind of things did you do when you weren't DJing?
There was so much to do there because I was living. One of the clubs I was working in was on the beach. I had an apartment on the
Oh, come
beach.
on, man.
Yeah, and it was just beautiful weather, beautiful girls, great. I mean, the food was amazing. The whole place was just paradise. There was one funny story. There was a US naval base very near one of the clubs. It was in a place
Hmm.
called Rota, and there was a lot of American, various sort of troops. I don't know. I'm not
Right,
into the military,
military.
but Yeah, but anyway, I remember some of these guys used to come to my club once. And at the time, there was an English band called Loose Ends. I don't know if you ever heard of Loose Ends. They were quite into the soul scene. And I remember one night I'm playing this track from Loose Ends, and there was these four black guys from one of the US bases, and one of them's come over to me, says, "Oh man, what's this tune?" And I said, "Oh, it's Loose Ends." He said, "I've never heard of Loose Ends." I said, "Yeah, it's an English band." And he started laughing. He said, "This ain't English." I said, "Yeah, this is an English band. This is English soul." He said, "This sounds like it comes from like California or so. This is not English." And so yeah, it was yeah. So I was kind of educating some of the guys from the States into
Yeah.
British soul, UK soul,
And I heard, I was listening to, I was watching this YouTube channel that I had just randomly come across because I sing at my church. And so they I guess analyze how people sing, the technicalities of singing. And so they were talking about when people sing, a lot of times you don't really hear an accent because that's just not how you sing. Like you don't sing with an accent, but sometimes those accents do come in with like how you pronounce words and stuff. So I was like, oh, I never really thought of that. But that's why you can get like a group like BTS where you go, wait a second. I had no idea that this was a bunch of guys from not from America. I'll say that because I don't know if they're from China or Japan or whatever, but they sing and you go, okay, they just sound like, guys from California or something. And so
yeah,
that's very, I just think it's interesting how singing can do that and how it works with the voice. So
yeah,
where else did you go? You went to Spain, and then because you lived in 11 countries, you visited over 80 countries as well. So
yeah.
where else did you go? Let's world hop here.
Well, listen. So before I got that job in Spain, there was a company called Bacchus who had contracts, DJ contracts all around the world. And I tried to get in with those guys, but it was a kind of catch-22 situation. They only gave you work if you had experience of working abroad. But how do you get experience of working abroad unless you're working for someone like them? And their response was, well, that's not really our problem. That's your problem. So anyway,
Oh, thanks a lot.
I got offered the work in Spain, and when I was in Spain, I got offered work in Finland. So then I went to work in Finland. And after I left Finland, now Bacchus contacted me and said, "We've heard that you've
Mhm.
been working in Spain, you've been working in Finland. Now you can work for us." So then they sent me all over the world. They first of all they sent me to
Mm.
Amsterdam, they sent me to Damascus in the Middle East, and then I was in Norway and Switzerland and various other countries in Europe. But then I got to where I really wanted to go. They sent me out to Japan.
There you go.
And once I got to Japan, I stayed in Asia for 10 years. I was in Hong Kong, South Korea, Indonesia, Singapore. I mean, that's when I really had a good time.
All over the place. Who are some of the people that you met there that maybe you're still friends with today that made an impact on you? Talk about some of those people because it's the people that we connect with in life that really make the experiences what they are.
Yeah, that's so true. Some people often say you'll talk about a place that you were living in or went to or visited. Oh, how is that place? And how that place is completely down to the people you were with.
Yep.
Because if you weren't with good people, maybe that place wasn't good. If you were with great people, maybe that place was great. So it wasn't about
Yep.
the place, it was the people you were with. So yeah, I
Yeah.
had in Japan, I had a great time. In fact, every country I went to in Asia, I loved. And even the countries I went to in Europe, I had a good time as well. So yeah, I've got really fond memories from Japan and from South Korea and especially from Indonesia because I stayed in Indonesia quite a long time. I ended up speaking almost fluent Indonesian. I loved it there. It was really good.
So who are some of the people? Like it could be club owners, friends, people that you met, maybe a
I,
girlfriend or somebody
I
like
tell
that.
you, one of the great things about Facebook for me, it's allowed me to keep in contact with people from all those
Mm.
places, from almost every country I've worked or lived in, with the exception of Syria. All those other countries, I've still got lots of friends. I'm able to see what they're up to every day, and we can
Man,
have
that's cool.
send messages back and forth. So that's one of the fantastic things about Facebook. So yeah, I've got many friends from around the world, and so from Facebook is great for that for me, keeping in touch with them.
So you talked about going to Japan, spending a lot of time out there on the far, far east. So I looked up this statistic, and it's going to be our second number here, right? We haven't talked about a number in a while. The average person changes jobs every 4.2 years. So I guess that's like 4 years and a couple of months here. So after working in radio, what was your aha moment to take you back to the UK where you basically grew up and then want to change course and get out of DJing? What was that moment, that time and place where you go, I'm kind of done with this. I kind of want to do something else. I want to get back home.
Well, it wasn't 4.2 years. For me, it was about 15 years. And
Yeah.
I'd been living abroad for 12 years. Well, no, actually, I'd been living abroad for 10 years. And I started to get tired of just DJing every night, 6 nights a week. And it wasn't as fun as it always had been. But
Right.
around the same time, my mum started to be getting really sick. She started losing her eyesight and she was going blind. And for the first time, I started to miss London. I'd never missed London before that. I was having such a good time. So it was a combination of all these things. I thought, yeah, maybe now is the time to go home. Also, I was getting older. I'm thinking maybe it's time to settle down now. So I went back to London. My best friend, who I've known since I was 4 years old, he's a financial advisor. He says to me, "Look, Tony, I've got so many clients I can't handle them. Maybe you can come and work with me." So I
Yeah.
worked with him. I did all the exams, and I quickly realized, man, I am not cut out to be a financial advisor because I loved speaking with people. But when I was trying to sell them a pension or trying to sell them a bond, or I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. It wasn't, I guess, and for me, because I was working at Chase, and I had worked my way up. I was a teller, part-time teller, and then I was became a like a lead teller, and then I moved over to the banking side, and I was going into taking my Series 6 and my Series 7. I think my exams, I passed the first one, but as I was going through the training, I was just thinking like, is this what I want to do? Because I had just graduated college too. I wanted to explore. I kind of wanted to just see what else was out there. Like banking had been good to me. I had great bosses. I had great people. But in my heart, I just kind of knew I want to see if there's something else. Like the bank will be here if I want to come back to it. It's not going anywhere. So, like I said, that's when I took my trip overseas. So when you realized, like, okay, I don't think this is it. How did you get into the next thing that you want to do?
Well, so while I was doing that and making no money at doing that, I was being offered lots of work as a DJ. Now,
Of course.
I decided I don't want to work as a club DJ anymore. But I was getting people offering me work as a wedding DJ, which is very different. Like for people who are not a DJ, it probably sounds, well, what's the difference? Working in a club or wedding, it's all the same. It's really different because in a
Different
club,
clientele too.
people are coming to me because they want to hear the music that I'm playing, that I like. So I'm not really taking requests so much. In a wedding, it's all about taking requests. It's all about keeping that bride and groom happy and their guests. So I'm not so
Yeah.
much playing my music, I'm playing music that I know is going to keep them happy. Where in a club is
Right.
very different. And in a club, everything is set up for the DJ to be successful because the lighting, the sound system, it's very easy to get a full dance floor in a club. In a
Yep.
wedding, you've got all sorts of factors against you. The atmosphere, they might have just had an argument. The equipment you use, maybe the acoustics of the room aren't very good. There's all sorts
Mm-hmm.
of things that make it much more difficult. And so in a way, it's much harder. Well, it's much when you can get a really good everyone going crazy in a wedding. There's a real much more feeling of achieving something than in a
Mm.
club. It's very easy to do that.
Yeah, and at weddings there are alternatives. Like you could just sit down if you want to. There are tables all over the place. I think because we're talking to more like reception,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So there's tables. You can sit and eat. You could chat with people because these are maybe family members that you haven't seen, people that you haven't met. So
yeah,
there
yeah,
are alternatives. Whereas in the club, you've gone there to dance.
yeah,
Basically, you've gone there to basically there's a bar and then there's a dance floor a
yeah.
lot of times. So there's not really like an alternative. Like if you don't want to be in here and dance, what are
And
you gonna do?
everyone's roughly the same age. In a wedding,
Yep.
you've got every age group, every music taste. It's just it's so much more difficult.
So when you hit it out the park at a wedding or at a reception, you're like, yep, I did a
Yeah,
good job tonight.
exactly.
So how did it, you gave this story about what you were charging, and then like somebody asked you a question about how much it was. Tell that story. I think that's pretty funny.
So, initially I start doing weddings. I have no idea what I should be charging. I've never done this before. So I'm just charging what the other guys are charging. And the other guys were charging nothing virtually. So I'm charging nothing. Anyway, so after a couple of years, I'm doing a wedding in a place, and the manager of the venue came over to me and said, "How much do you charge?" And I said, I think it was like £200 or something. And
Mm-hmm.
he took a step back. He looked at me, he said, "You're charging what?" He says, "I have DJs here charging more than double that. They're nowhere near as good as you. Why are you And the line he used, he said, you're selling a Ferrari for the price of a Cortina." You probably don't know what a Cortina is. A Cortina is this old beat up car. It's like a rubbish car, you know.
A hoopty.
And and then I started. I'd never actually thought about my prices. You know, I just charged what everyone else charged. And the next day, I actually started thinking about, why am I charging that?
Yeah.
So I doubled my price, and I figured no one's going to book me at this price because I'm way too expensive now. And I didn't realize it at the time. When I look back now, I realize every single person that inquired still paid that new price. So it was clear now that new price was still too cheap, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
least then my thinking had changed. And then I went on a journey from where I was like £200 by 10 years later, 11 years later, I was about £2,000. So I increased it like tenfold in a space of 10 years or so. Yeah.
Man, and that's sometimes people just ask these questions that don't even, they may not think it is going to do a whole lot, but they ask the one question that makes you ask yourself many more
Mm.
questions. And
Yeah.
you go, dang, why do I charge that much?
Yeah.
And you coming from the credentials that you have, this guy probably is looking, and like he said, he was like, wait a second, you're really good. Like you gotta be, one of the best and experienced guy. And he had probably had no idea about all your experience traveling all around the world being a DJ. So
Yeah.
you probably could have came out the gate charging whatever you wanted to charge. But when we're in these different places, right, in life, in these different occupations, we don't look at ourselves the same, right? So as a teacher, I look at myself one way, like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing here. As a teacher, I feel comfortable. If I were to go to another high school in the country, I'd be like, I kind of know how to be a teacher at a high school. But if they were to take me in, we'll keep it in education. If they were to put me in the elementary school, I probably would be like, I don't, not 100% sure. Or if they were to put me like as an accountant, right, I wouldn't have as much confidence. And so I think that goes back to the habits that we create now,
Mm.
especially once we get into these new situations. So we'll jump into that, right? So you talked about these tiny habits, and I'll just introduce it with this 5-day number, right? We got another 5 here because on the website, it gives you this 5-day free program to start off with. So my question here is, did you start off with that program? And then how did that experience kind of push you into now taking the tiny habits further and starting your own podcast and all of that stuff?
So, so I became. There's a book, Tiny Habits, and the author BJ Fogg is a professor in Stanford University.
Mm-hmm.
But before he wrote the book, which I think he wrote the book in like 2018, 2019, something like that, the concept he'd already been popularizing it from around 2010, something along those lines.
Okay.
And I first found out about it, I think it was around about 2011, 2012, something like that. But it didn't really, although I came across it, it didn't really sort of go inside at that time. But around that same time, there was a few health things started coming up in my world. I had asthma since a kid. Um, when I was living abroad, I didn't have any problems with asthma. When I went back to England, the asthma started to return. Around the same time, my mum, she got, apart from losing her eyesight, she then got breast cancer. Um, and then it went, and she had aggressive chemotherapy. And then it came back again, and she had a mastectomy. And then it went, then it came back again. She had a double mastectomy. And then eventually she got diagnosed with terminal cancer 2 days after her brother had just died of cancer. And
Wow.
so within the space of 2 days, my mum has been, told she's got terminal cancer. My uncle has just passed away. I'm talking with one of the sons of my uncle, so one of my cousins,
Hmm.
and it suddenly dawned upon us, neither of us had realized every single relative that's died has died of cancer. Like 100% of my relatives that have died of cancer.
Wow. About how
And in
many
my,
people was that?
I don't know, there's quite a few, you know,
Okay. Okay.
um, and like 12, something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to get cancer. It's just a matter of time till I get cancer. But that led me on a journey of I just
Hmm.
started devouring books on health, on cancer, on nutrition. Initially, it was those three topics. I was just reading so many books. But then that kind of led me on to various other about sort of breathing and psychology and then philosophy and other things. But I realized within a few years, okay, I'm not destined to get cancer because I understood about epigenetics and so on.
Right.
And then I realized how I live my life has a much bigger play on whether I get cancer and how I eat and how much stress I endure and so on than my genes. So now I
Yeah. Yeah.
realize I'm not destined to get cancer, but that was my thinking back then. But the tiny habits along the way, when I started, reading more and more books, and I started doing courses in nutrition and in stress and so on, and I realized I started working with people as a coach, and I had good knowledge about these areas, but I
Hmm.
didn't know how to help them to change their habits, to change their behavior.
Right.
And then the tiny habits came back and I thought, oh yeah, that tiny habits. I wonder if that could help me here. So then I got back then I did the course to become a tiny habits coach. And
Hmm.
then I realized, okay, so now I know how to help people with their nutrition, with their breathing, with their sleep. But now I can help them to make a new behavior, to change behaviors, to make it a habit. Yeah.
So what was that transition? So you have your stuff first, right? You have all this knowledge. You've read these books. You've gone through some training, and it didn't, like you said, it didn't really click. It didn't all come together until the
Mm,
habits started.
yeah.
So give us an example, if you can, to one of those things that changed once you introduced the tiny habits portion of it.
So say for example, you're getting a lot of stress and
Hmm.
and I said, and I'm working with you, and it looks like one of the things that's going to help you is if you can learn to meditate. Now, a
Hmm.
lot of people want to meditate, but they say they can't meditate for various reasons that they'll give. So, a way that tiny habits can help is say you're saying to me that I really want to meditate, Tiny, I just can't do it. So I'll say to you, okay, well, let's make it too easy to fail. So rather
Right.
than most people, they're too ambitious with their New Year's resolutions and all these things, these changes
Oh,
in their life
yeah.
that they're going to do. And there's too many of them for one thing, but they're too ambitious. So if you were going to run a marathon, it wouldn't be a good idea to start running 26 miles every day from the beginning. You're going to start running maybe around a block or something like that. Yeah. So it's the same thing with any other thing that you want to introduce. So in a meditation, instead of being what most people do, they start trying to meditate 20 minutes a day or something like that. It's not realistic. So if
Right.
you can start to meditate for a minute each day, that's almost impossible to fail. Or even 20 seconds. There's something that's absolutely impossible to fail. Because the important thing we're trying to do is make it a habit. And if you do
Yes.
that every day, it might become a habit for you after 10 days, maybe 30 days, maybe 50 days. When you hear this thing about 21 days to
Right.
make a habit, or 68 days, that's all rubbish. There's no scientific validity to any of that because it's
Thank you.
different for every person. But so as I said, it for you, it might only be 10 days. It could be whatever number. But the important
Hmm.
thing is there will be a point where suddenly you just do this without thinking.
Yep.
And once you're into that area, then you can increase the duration. So maybe you're at a minute, maybe now you do 5 minutes, or maybe you slowly increase the duration.
Hmm.
But now
Hmm.
you've got that new meditation habit and you're dealing with anxiety better, you're dealing with stress better, it's probably you're a bit better able to sleep now as well. And so, so that's kind of how it works.
Okay. So now here, I want you to take those, all of that training, all of that wonderful stuff that you've necessarily put into place, not just with yourself, but with other people. And I want you to answer our three what's here. All right, this the last portion, right? But it can go as long as the music portion. Totally up to you. So in our three what's, inside or outside of your field, right? This could be habits, this could be DJing, this can apply to whatever you've done. What's an opinion that you have that will be considered unpopular?
I have a lot of those. One is have you heard of a guy called Sean Stevenson?
Sean Stevenson,
He's he's an
maybe.
Amer- he's an American guy. He does a podcast called The Model Health Show, and
Nope.
there's one thing that he said, and he's a doctor, and I remember a quote that he made a few years ago, and I agree with it 100%. And it was along the lines of he says in 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to look back at the 2010s, 2020s and realize, why was it legal to sell children processed food, junk food, McDonald's, all of that stuff?
Mm.
Why is it legal? And I agree with that completely. It shouldn't be legal. But,
So it should be 100% illegal.
yeah, because we're killing our kids. Yeah.
Oh man,
We,
trust me, I'm right there with you as far as junk food is concerned. I'm always thinking, because I'm not going to stop eating ice cream, okay? But I can't eat ice cream every day after school. That is going to be very harmful to my body. Now, if 2 days a week I have 3 or 4 spoons full of ice cream, that is not going to kill me, right? Hopefully. I could be wrong in 50 years. But in moderation, I feel like my wife and I, we love Whataburger and Chick-fil-A. I don't know if you're familiar, but these are fast food chains.
mm,
We don't eat Whataburger, not even 2 days a week.
mm,
Maybe on the weekend, we'll choose one. So maybe on a Saturday, we'll eat Whataburger. And just on Saturday, like Sunday, Friday, we're not still eating fast food. But
mm,
the next Saturday, we may eat Chick-fil-A or we may eat out somewhere, but it's not fast food, right? So if
mm.
you can kind of do the right things Monday through Friday, I forgot who said this. Maybe it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's not the best person to follow as far as diet is concerned, but who knows? But Monday through Friday, if you're doing the right things and you do just a little bit more on the weekend, not both days, maybe a Saturday or a Sunday, I feel like you can get away, with that. Your body can bounce back and you can do some great things. So nutritionists, please tell me if I'm off base here.
No, you're on base, and what you're talking about is moderation. And moderation is great, but for many people, they're not able to moderate themselves. And
Mm,
if everyone was able to moderate themselves, then it wouldn't be a problem having places like McDonald's and so on. But that
yep.
isn't the world we live in. And most people
No.
aren't able to moderate themselves. And that's why they're a problem. Because they're not a problem if you've only eaten them every now and then. There's not an issue with that. But the problem is that many people are eating there daily
Mm.
and drinking those sodas and the amount of
Oh my
sugar and
goodness.
salt and yeah.
So, okay, because you have this expertise in this field, right? We're talking about food, we're talking about nutrition. Just give us two things that people can do, right? If you want to get their kids, even themselves, off of the junk food. I guess you jump in your tiny habits mindset here. Just give us two things. Don't give us the whole kit and caboodle, right? I know you got a podcast and the thing to do, but just a few little things that we can do. Tiny things.
Well, and it does have to be tiny, because realistically, if someone's eating really unhealthy now, to expect them suddenly to eat really healthy is completely unrealistic, and it's unworkable for them as well. So if you can imagine a scale from -10 to +10,
Mhm.
-10 being really, really processed food, really junk food, +10 being like ultra organic and
Yeah.
eating on up in heaven or somewhere. So if someone is now on -8, then it's not, if you try and change them to +8, it's not going to work. So if you can get them to -7, that's a win, because
Yep.
just by making that little change, that might give them enough momentum then to get to -7 or -6 and to -5 and so on. So it's not about trying to get them over here to the pluses. It's just if they're a -8 now, let's just get them to -7, because that might still be not very healthy, but it's healthier than it
Right.
was. It's not as
Yep.
bad as it was, you know.
Yep. Okay, let's move to our second what. If you weren't in your field, so I guess right now that's podcasting and talking about health and nutrition and mindset, what field would you be in? What other occupation do you think you maybe go into? Not financial advising, I don't think.
I can guarantee you it would not be financial advice. I think it would be something related. I still love sport. I still love, I think in some ways, maybe like a personal trainer or
Oh, okay,
something we're
okay.
related to helping people. So it's a different area of health, because I love swimming and playing football and running and cycling and triathlons, and I just love all that kind of stuff, you know.
Okay. Awesome. You be in fitness. So you're
Yeah.
the kind of guy, Tony, and I think we're alike in this way. You just got to find a way to help people, in the best way that you can. And you're like, well, if I like DJing, then I'm gonna help people DJing. If I'm into fitness, well, I'm gonna help people in fitness. So I
Mm.
applaud you. Everybody, let's give Tony a clap wherever you are. You're in the car, you're listening to this in your living room. Let's give Tony a round of applause, because helping people that's what life is about. At least that's what I think. So we're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
move on to our last what. Now, what advice would you give to someone in high school? So if I were to take this back to my classroom, show my kids like, hey, Tony Winyard had some amazing topics and amazing advice to give you guys, what would you say?
I mean, there were so many things that could be said, and I've got a 13-year-old daughter. But I think the one thing, and many of the things, the advice that we would like to give children, it's a waste of time because they're not ready
I
to
know it's
hear it. So
right.
the thing that, and even this, many kids are not ready to hear it. But I think the thing that I would like to say to children is try not to compare yourself to other kids, because it's not
Okay.
helping you in any way. And don't compare yourself, especially to people you see on social media. Just do your own thing. The only people you need to compare yourself to is how you were yesterday, how you were last week. That's the only person to compare yourself to.
I love it, Tony. So now that we've had this amazing conversation, you've talked about world hopping and being this world famous DJ and being a super wedding DJ, and you've got Tiny Habits. Now I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, talk about your podcast, talk about your website. Your time to shine here.
So my website is tinywinyard.com, and Winyard is Winyard. My podcast is called Habits and Health, and you can find that on the tinywinyard.com website. And I'm on various social media. Although, to be honest, I don't really like using social media, but I am on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter. Although I never use Twitter, but I'm on there. I guess the one I use more is Facebook, and it's probably
Okay.
because what we talked about earlier. I've got friends, so many friends from all around the world, so do tend to use Facebook more. Um, and yeah, the podcast comes out once a week. Actually, next week is my 200th episode, so I've been doing it for a few years now.
Hey,
And yeah, I loved
congratulations.
it. And it's on series 3. So now series 3 is called Habits and Health. Series 1 was called Exceeding Expectations. So I used to
Okay.
interview people who had the attitude where they love to over deliver, love to give their customers an amazing experience. And I love to kind of drill into that mindset. What is it? Why do you enjoy getting people much more than they expected? So that was series
Right.
1. Series 2 was called Happiness versus Flourishing, and it was more kind of on a philosophical edge. And it was, so one of the things in the American Constitution, it says about the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, you can't pursue happiness. You can pursue flourishing, and happiness will come. But if you try to search for happiness, or you try to aim for happiness, it's doesn't really, you can't, it's not realistic to
Right.
expect to be happy all the
It's
time.
fleeting. Happiness
Yeah.
is always, the
Yeah.
goalpost is always moving.
And it's the result of something else. It's the result of listening to music, of playing some kind of sport, of having fun with your friends. It's the byproduct.
Right.
So So that podcast was exploring that about happiness versus flourishing. How can we have a flourishing life rather than aiming to be happy all the time, which is not realistic?
All right, guys. So that's Tony Winyard. Winyard.
We-
He has tons of episodes. Go and listen to his. He has a tremendous story. There are so many things that we couldn't even scratch the surface of. I listened to you on some, I keep saying that, but I found it very fascinating. You talked about, race and growing up in your country, being from having a black dad from the Sudan. And so like, guys, we didn't even get to touch on all of that stuff, right? We just kind of gave Tony Winyard's story, but man, I'm grateful to have you on. It was an amazing podcast. I think we had a lot of fun here talking music and talking just growing up in life and changing jobs.
Well, and
So
you had some great questions, Tony. So I really appreciate it. And it was interesting to hear some of your life as well in some of the things I was answering, and you were kind of relating that back to experiences from your life. So that was cool. Yeah.
I think that's I'm going through like this, I don't know if metamorphosis might be too big of a word, right? But, and this is for maybe any other podcaster that is listening as well. But your podcast is yours, right? We want to highlight our guests. I want to talk about Tony and his life and all the things that he's gone on to, because I want him to be able to add value to the listeners by giving his experiences. But hey, guess what? I got my hand up. I got some experiences too. And so if they relate to what you're talking about, I think just as people, we're having a conversation, it will behoove us both for me to not share those experiences and for us to talk about that back and forth and kick it around and talk about living abroad because we both done it. Talk about that financial world because we both looked at it and was like, no. And talk about music because we both love it. So it only makes sense to me as a host, at least for the show that I'm doing, for me to add value as well with the stories that I have. So I'm glad you pointed that out, so because everybody doesn't always see it the same.
Cool.
As I take the last sip of my coffee here, Tony, it's great having you on. Thank you for coming on. Make sure you guys go check him out, TonyWinyard.com. Say your podcast again.
Habits and Health.
Habits and Health podcast. Go check it out. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, download, all of that great stuff. Make sure you leave a comment if this helped you in any kind of way. Make a comment down there and we can have a discussion. Keep going. This is the Living Numbers Podcast, signing off for both Tonys. I will see you all in the next Rambles.